This lecture will cover the tasks of a toddler. In other words, some of our communicative beginnings as we move on from Chapter 1, and we're going to talk about some basic, important theoretical concepts as we move forward and talk about how young children communicate.
In order to look at this, we have to know a couple of important definitions. Now, phonology looks at specifically phonetic units and particular sounds. So these are the vowels and the consonants that we use. Now, morphology, this is the study of the smallest unit of language standing by itself with a recognized meaning. So the best examples that we have of this would include prefixes like un or ill, or suffixes like ing or ness. When we look at syntax, we look at the word order and rules like noun and then verb, or adjective and then noun. Of course, these are variable by language because we all know that in some languages, for example, you might have a noun and then an adjective. But in any case, that's what syntax refers to. It refers to our word order and rules. Or let's say whether the word the is feminine or masculine, as in some languages, like French or Spanish, for example, any Romance language has distinctive types of words, for the. So el or la or il in some languages. And then grammar, of course, is different than that. These are our written and spoken utterances, and these describe our rules of syntax. Some grammar errors that we often hear with toddlers, we see overregularization. So we'll have the tendency to make language, like regularize rules. That's why we call it overregularization. So we'll use past tenses like ed on a verb ending. So he doed it, or we'll say mouses or deers, because we just have cracked the code, so to speak. We figured out, well, that's how you make something more than one. You put an S on the end, or you put an ED on the end to mean that it already happened, and so we tend to overregularize. In terms of inflection or grammatical markers, such as our plurals or a change in pitch or loudness of voice, these are also kind of rules of grammar that we learn. So for example, when we ask a question, our voice goes up. Do you have any cookies? There's a specific kind of inflection that we tend to use. And then semantics, this is the study of meanings that we associate with words and the acquisition of vocabulary. So not just the words that we use or the vocabulary that we use, but the meanings that we associate with those words. So for example, whatever and whatever have two totally different meanings. One is sarcastic, and so that would be something that we would look at when we study. Now, pragmatics, this is how we use language effectively in a social context. So we have varying speech patterns depending on our social circumstances. To my sister, I might say, hey, what's up? But to my boss, I might say, good morning, how are you? Because these are language patterns that depend, or speech patterns that depend on our social circumstances. This would also include nonverbal types of signals that we use in terms of communication. So for example, bowing or nodding your head, kissing somebody on one cheek and then the other cheek. All of those things are forms of pragmatic communication that relate to how we use language effectively in our social context. We also have some other things that we think about. We know that attachment and the development of our language skills, that's an important part of being a toddler. We see with reactive attachment disorder, for example, or speech delays, that sometimes there can be an emotional component when we see that there's clear evidence that that something socially or emotionally has happened with a child. So you can have a speech delay that's not necessarily connected to something emotional, but we often see with children that have suffered some kind of an emotional trauma or some kind of an issue that there are speech delays. So for example, if a child has experienced a great trauma, they might go through a long silent period or might even have speech delays. And in particular, if it is connected to attachment, like the children in orphanages who have reactive attachment disorder because they were there for so long and interacted with so little, often have speech delays. As we talked about in Chapter 1, there's an inextricable link between the social world and language development. Very important. In terms of our first words, we move from egocentric speech to inner speech. Egocentric speech is Piaget's term. He says that we speak aloud because we are egocentric, because we are definitely all about our own world. And certainly we know that that is developmental for young children. But he felt that that was the only real purpose of speaking aloud, that it was just a reflection of where we're at developmentally, that we're in the egocentric stage, and that without regard to the fact that other people can hear us, we speak aloud. It's just a reflection. Now, Vygotsky said something different than that. Um, he talked about this as being private speech. He didn't say it was egocentric speech moving into inner speech. He said that it was private speech and that it actually serves an important function in helping us cognitively learn how to accomplish a task. And as evidence for that, he said, well, that's why adults still talk to themselves too if they're by themselves. And it's just that we all learn as we get older to take it underground so that we can't hear it. But in any case, we know that there are words that accompany a child's actions or viewing actions at hand. So they'll see something and they'll say, oh, doggy, cookie. They'll pick it up, they'll hold it. And as the child matures, this becomes inner speech and it's a part of the child's thinking process. In terms of symbolic gesturing, these are what we think about as first words when they're intentional and meaningful, are symbolic gesturing, particularly with the use of sign language, which has become so prevalent in the last few years. We can see that symbolic gesturing is very important. Our first words, we tend to have one word to two or more words at around 18 months. And in terms of toddler-adult conversations, around 10 months to a year, babies start turn-taking. Our negatives, generally when we first use negatives, it's to indicate non-existence. So, for example, we'll say, no cookie, meaning there is no cookie there. But then later on, we use negatives to denote rejection. No bath, no bed, no nap, no crib. So that's kind of the thing that comes next. And then denial. Did you eat the cookie? No. And just denial, as in negotiating something and wishing to deny what could potentially come next. In terms of aids to toddler speech development, some things that we can do with toddlers to develop their speech. We know that we learn language through music. I bet many of us learned the months of the year, the books of holy text, and other important concepts that we carry with us into adulthood that we've learned through music. So that's a very powerful aid in terms of learning language and keeping something permanent in our heads. Symbolic play helps children develop their speech. Friendship, of course, any kind of social interaction promotes language. We learn from our parents. We introduce toddlers to books. Again, at a very early age, we talked about reading to newborns. Novelty in electronic books, all those fantastic new books that have, all sorts of bells and whistles. You press a little button and Thomas goes peep peep, or Scooby-Doo goes Scooby-Doo, or whatever other sounds that they make. Children find those very interesting. And then scribbling also is something that we think helps toddlers' speech.
So adult language techniques that can be really helpful for young children are listed here. So labeling oneself, such as saying I'm mommy or I'm daddy instead of I or me in speech. So for example, well, mommy's going to answer the door. Limiting topics and sentences. Sometimes if there are too many things going on in a sentence, it may be hard for a child of this age to follow. And using short and simple sentences in general is also helpful. Repetition is key. You can expand or recast children's one-word or unfinished utterances. So for example, if a toddler says kitty, then the parent offers, well, kitty's name is Fluff. And also using a wide range of voice frequencies to gain the child's attention and initiate a communication exchange is helpful. Carrying both sides of an adult-child conversation, so the child asks questions and then answers the questions. This technique is most used with infants, but it's common during the toddler period. The adult is modeling some kind of a social exchange. So it sounds a little bit like, do you want a cookie? I know you want a cookie. The cookie is so delicious. The cookie is so delicious. So you're carrying both sides of the conversation. And then echoing a child's invented word. Many toddlers adopt a special word for a certain object, and the whole family may use the child's word in conversational exchanges also. Um, this is something that is considered to be most appropriate for parents and only occasionally appropriate for caregivers, because really we do want children to learn correct words too. So in your book, this is definitely talked about as something that is helpful as an adult technique, but be aware that in the school context, you really do also want to emphasize correct words for things. So the baby talk kind of words that children make up, if you start using those only, then children don't necessarily learn the correct word for a long time. It just lengthens that process.
We do need to recognize that there are some differences in language growth. In general, there's a range, but by 18 months to 2 years, we should be able to identify language delays. In terms of beginning literacy, we know that using musical toys and musical activities are also very important. And again, it kind of helps us to weed through figuring out if a child is responding to language, kind of developing, moving forward. And that helps children, of course.
So my final thought for this chapter is to just really think through how we are supporting toddlers in their capacity to grow. We know that toddlers can thrive in and out of the classrooms. We've got lots of opportunities for them to grow and learn. We want them to be in a language-rich environment, to have great social interactions and opportunities to play so that they can learn about cause and effect and problem solving. We know that their growing brains allow them to start to understand these new ideas and make new connections, and that our own interactions as adults really moderate this. We support them by modifying our comments and teaching them new words, and then, of course, creating that fabulous language-rich environment in which they'll be able to grow and thrive.